All, this is Dr. Mobeen Syed from Drbeen.com. My apologies. I just did this talk a few minutes ago, and it seems like I did not share my screen. So I'm going to redo this, and I'm going to share my screen this time, I promise, and we'll talk about it. So the topic today is Sweden. I had done one lecture before about this Sweden's policy and the outcome. This was about 3-4 months ago, and many of you have been asking me to do a latest update as well. So I thought I'll do that. So here is the discussion once more for the current state. I think that they have, in some ways, did well, and in some ways there may be still to be observed how the finally the policy is going to pan out. The right way to look at this all is that once the pandemic is over and then the final numbers are in where the further infections are not happening, that is when the right outcome can be observed. However, the point in time, at this time, let's see what is going on. So once again, apologies that I didn't share my screen before. I'm going to share it this time and hopefully it will make sense. So can you see my screen? And apologies again. Let's start. So look, the Sweden, and somebody had left a comment here, I believe Lying Guys, who is a very regular of our viewers, he had said that, he or she had said that this is an unfair comparison and it should be compared to New York. And I actually will agree to this right up front, that we haven't done, I'm in the US, I'm a US citizen as well, we haven't done anything, we haven't done great here. And so the situation here is not the best. So I had said that in my last talk as well. If I talk about US, probably I'll say some harsh words, and we should, I think I'll do that once as well. But let's start with the Sweden, because I had done this discussion before. And if you would like me to talk about more countries as well, please let me know. Tell me this, can you actually see this this screen? Margaret, thank you very much for joining. So glad to see you as well. And let's start our discussion. So this is August 17. Here we are looking at these 4 countries. And again, to context, the folks are saying that you should compare it to the other countries as well. Definitely we can do that. And please put a comment here to compare Sweden to others. Sweden has done much better in many ways, and Sweden has not done much better in some ways as well. So we, again, the non-political, unbiased, whatever I'm looking at, that is what I'm going to present. If I'm incorrect, then I'm incorrect. But I have the links in the description as well that you can go and see and kind of make up your mind for what the numbers that I'm presenting, what do they mean? So let's start. In Sweden at this time, the actual cases are 85,045. And the deaths are 5,787. Per million cases, not deaths, per million cases are 8,200. Compare that to Finland, 7,752 number of cases, 334 deaths, and by August 17, that is today, the number of cases are 711 per million. Also keep in mind, if you look at the map over here, Sweden's population is 10.23 million, and then Finland is almost half of it, 5.5. Then Norway, 5.4, Denmark, 5.8. So other countries are almost half of it. Denmark, 16,000 cases, 621 deaths, and 2,560 cases per million. Norway, 10,000 cases, 261 deaths, 1,780 cases per million. Now compare that to UK, 4,600 cases per million, almost half of Sweden, and US, 15,400 per million. And here is the thing. The US numbers actually need to be put in context And the context is that per million does not actually show us the gravity of the situation correctly, and that is true for all of the countries as well. So a couple of slides later, I'm going to actually talk about the case fatality rate versus crude mortality rate versus infection fatality rate, and I'm going to put these numbers in the right scientific formulas so that when we are talking about it, we are not haggling and hustling and somebody saying that, well, you should have looked at the number of deaths over the whole population or number of deaths per confirmed cases. So we'll look at that data in a second. But this is the numbers that I have right now over here. And last time, my apologies, I did not look at the comments where people were actually telling me that I'm not sharing my screen. So I'm going to look at the comments a little more this time. So there is a comment, isn't this the case that Sweden's neighbors are exceptionally high in vitamin D? I do not know about that. And the second question is, for me, the question after reading this is, why would Sweden have lesser vitamin D compared to the similar geography from others? But something interesting to look at. Now, if I adjust the population here, and once again, this is not a linear way to adjust. I have done it linearly. I simply doubled the populations or the cases. So again, if Sweden stands at 85,000 cases, Finland would stand at 15,000, Denmark at 32,000, and Norway at 20,000. This is a linear extrapolation. It is doubling the numbers, which would not be the right way to do it, because when you double the number in a similar geography, the density is now doubled. And that would actually change the rate of spread in a way that cannot be linear. So ideally, once you double the numbers, the number of cases and the death rate would actually go up differently than simply doubling. So that means the numbers I'm putting here with the adjusted numbers are not exactly correct. The number of deaths in Sweden, 5,700. Finland would have, if you doubled it, 668. Denmark, 1,200. And then Norway 522. So that would be the numbers. Of course, if you look at it this way, it looks like Sweden is not doing much better. However, if you stay with me and we talk about the next screen, you would see that there are some things that Sweden is actually doing much better on. So once again, I'm hoping that you can see my screen. Now I'm alarmed. I had to do this one again. So discussion. First of all, here are the numbers. This is the case rate or number of cases per day. I took this from Johns Hopkins. I just lined over it. And so what is happening, interesting for Sweden, is this, that Sweden, after this number goes down, which they have almost gone down, they are not expecting a second wave because they never actually locked down. So there is no concept of a second wave for them. And I wanted to show you something from US, which really kind of bothers me. So if you look at this number here, do you see this graph here? This is US. Our first wave never ended, and another wave on the first wave has already started. So that is horrible that we are going through this situation. Anyways, back here, Sweden is now going downwards, and hopefully in another few weeks or months, they would actually end up with almost no cases. And then they would not be expecting a second wave because they never closed down the system. And even for their first wave, the reason that they say that we had a very high number of deaths, that is because unfortunately, the infection spread in the old age homes, and that is where the basic damage occurred. Now, what would happen to the other countries? So if I look at Finland went up like this and it's coming down. But if you look at the Finland in Johns Hopkins, you would see that there is a tiny second wave that is appearing. Now, would this continue to appear or they would just control it? We'll see. The reason that other countries may be able to control the second wave and not let it happen would be, number one, it is possible that they reach in a very protected way to the point where they can have vaccines. It is possible that they reach a point where they can have monoclonal or polyclonal antibodies. It is possible that they reach a point which I think that we are at a point in the world where there are so many protocols, for example, Math Plus protocol, for example, Zelenko's protocol, for example, the Dr. Bartlett's steroid therapies. There are possibilities that we can actually manage patients better. And I know countries that have been using steroids or hydroxys, and they have kept their death rate very low. So maybe these countries would reach a point where they would control it, and maybe they will not be able to. Maybe when they open up the societies again, they would also have a similar disaster in terms of old age houses or homes or other such things happening in the society, and the spread occurs again. If I continue here, Denmark, if you see here, Denmark is actually in a second wave again. Now, how bad is the second wave? Same comment as I said before, don't know, but we still need to see. Look at Sweden. Sweden is probably going to say, we are not going to expect a second wave. Denmark is going to as they open up. Similarly, Norway. If you see here, this is all coming from John Hopkins. So you can actually see there is a slight second wave that is appearing for Norway as well. So would they actually, these countries, will they actually be able to contain it and continue to contain it while they open up? Or will they actually get the second wave and have the damage which they had prevented before? My opinion, this is opinion, my opinion is they would probably not have as disastrous an outcome, because they would have options that the world has been looking for and has finally found some of them to be decent. Now, one more thing that is very interesting is herd immunity. Although Tegnell had never said that we are doing this to develop herd immunity, but he had been in May, he had been thinking that maybe by middle of the May or the end of the May, month of May, there would be herd immunity established as well. And I just talked about it, that so there is a paper here, and that paper is, I think this is the paper, Journal of the Royal Society of Medicine, that they showed that their herd immunity in Sweden in August, I believe, sorry, in July and August 11th, herd immunity is only 15%. And I have a comment over here that I think that the herd immunity may be more than 15%. And hear me out that how I think that that may be more. We have done this discussion many times with the other studies, that number one, there are people in a society who become infected at a low, with the low symptoms or almost asymptomatic, especially youngsters and children, and they recover. And I have done this discussion as well, that a possibility for them to recover at this stage is because their innate arm, so this is the innate arm, their innate arm, that means natural killer cells, dendritic cells, macrophages, they take over the responsibility of taking care of the infection, and they curtail the virus. So if that is the case, these folks may not have a high level of antibodies produced. And so if you test them, they would not show antibodies. So you might assume that, well, they're not participant in herd immunity, but maybe they are. Because eventually what we need is that they do not catch again and they do not spread again. So maybe they are part of the herd immunity. So that is one possibility, which is not measured when we just measure the antibodies. Second possibility is that we know the innate arm connects with the naive cells in the adaptive arm, and then naive cells will go to the T helper 2 pathway, which will go to B cells pathway, which will then cause immunoglobulins or antibody production, correct? This is what we measure. And this is also shown in various studies, that it is not necessary that everybody who can combat this virus has to go through the antibody pathway. The studies have shown that it is actually possible that naive T cell go to T helper 1 pathway, which goes to cytotoxic pathway, cytotoxic T cell pathway, and this pathway has very little immunoglobulins produced, because these are really the cytotoxic T cells that are functioning and taking care of the infection. So that means it is possible that we are only measuring here, but we are leaving out in our measurement folks who may have a better innate arm, or folks who actually switched to cytotoxic T cell pathway and they had very tiny amounts of the antibodies. So that means, in my opinion, this is now the opinion, it is possible that if we have 15% here, there may be another 10-15% on the cytotoxic side. There may be another 10-15% on the innate arm side. Or to make it even more accurate, if you look at the population in Sweden lesser than 18 years of age, they may have a better control in this side. And they all may have been participant in the herd immunity, which we cannot count by looking at the antibodies. So there are multiple. So one is the innate arm, then the second one is the antibodies, which we test all the time. Then the third possibility will be cytotoxic T cells, which we do not test. We do not test this. We do not test this. And then it is also possible that there are folks who have better cross reactivity and better NK cells and so on. So herd immunity of 15%, and this is not just for Sweden, this may be for others as well, that the herd immunity may not, when we count 15%, there may actually be more people who are immune. So that is a good for Sweden if that is the way it is. But I cannot say that with surety until there are ways to measure the innate arms response and the cytotoxic T cell response. Now, will the other countries developing, are they developing herd immunity? What is happening in the lockdown? I do not know the data for the other countries. I can give you the data for my county here, Santa Clara County in California. They had done a study over here. I think these were 3,000 or 4,000 people, and they found, so we were in lockdown. So comparing Sweden to some other lockdown area, they found that 3 to 4% of the people had developed antibodies without going to hospitals. So maybe these 3 to 4% then add the NK cell or the innate arm, and then add the cytotoxic as well, and the herd immunity may be more. So this is the second wave and herd immunity discussion. Sweden may have actually come out on top by claiming or by having no second wave, and the other countries may have the second waves. Other countries may have come on top by not having a second wave, which is as disastrous, because there are more management options available now, and they'll continue to become available if they continue to wait a little more. Then is the case fatality rate. So this is where I really want us to focus, at least for the numbers. Look, I was watching the interview, which Trump and Axiom's interview, where Trump had produced a chart where he said that, hey, look at this chart, the numbers over here are good. And then the host of the interview, he picked up the chart and he said, I am talking about the deaths per over the whole population, and that looks bad. And they both were talking different. They were looking at the same number in a different way. And the thing is this, they both were actually correct. Trump was looking at the case fatality rate, and the host was looking at the crude death rate. The problem is in the media and in general populace, we have not been separating these two terms correctly. So here, at least for us, I would like us to look at this, that the case fatality rate, and I have that article over here, you can go there and read it a little more, the case fatality rate versus the crude mortality rate versus the infection fatality rate. So look at this. Case fatality rate is percentage of deaths out of the confirmed cases. That is what is called case fatality rate, or CFR. That is the definition of it. So that means for any country, when we look at CFR, we are going to look at the deaths percentage or percent of folks dying out of the confirmed cases. Now, there is a issue over here. In some countries, in some areas, the testing is more. So the number of cases proved by test will be more. And if you have the percentage of death out of them, then it would look lesser. On the other hand, there may be countries which are not testing as much, and so the confirmed cases are the ones that ended up in the hospitals only. And then when you have number of deaths out of those who are with the less tested population, a smaller number of people who are confirmed, then the case fatality rate would look higher. Crude death rate or crude mortality rate is another number where you take the total number of deaths and take their percentage from the total population. So that is what was happening, that the host of the Axiom interview was saying, I am looking at the number of deaths out of the whole population, and I think we're not doing good. And the Trump was looking at the number from number of percentage of death out of the confirmed cases. Over here, I want to put this disclaimer. I have no bias when I'm talking about the medicine, pro-Trump or anti-Trump. I do not have that bias. I was just looking at these two folks talking with each other, and I thought that it was interesting that the challenge to each other was occurring because of two separate definitions. And then finally, the number that really should matter and will matter is called infection fatality rate. That number is the percentage of deaths out of the actual total infected cases. So if a population has actually 1,000 infected people, and then out of them some folks died, that percentage is called infection fatality rate, and that is the right number to look at. Problem is, we cannot look at that number because we do not know in any society today what is the right total count of the people who are infected. There are people who are infected and they are asymptomatic. There are people who are infected and mildly symptomatic. They never go to hospitals and they recover at home. And then there are people who go to the rest of these stages and they are counted. Then some countries are doing more testing, some are doing less. The way to measure the infection fatality rate is to actually ideally take the whole population, test everyone, then say what are the number of people who are infected, and then take the percentage of deaths out of them. That is impossible to do. So maybe a bigger slice of test cases, and from there we do the statistical projection to say that we think that the number of infected people are this. So this is why it is important to keep in mind that people keep carrying various numbers to make their point. Somebody says, I want to look at the number of deaths per 100,000. Another person says, I want to look at the number of deaths per million. Another says, I want to see the number of deaths out of the population. These are all numbers that would vary and fluctuate based on various kind of geographies and states. The right scientific numbers are going to be, you look at CFR, or you look at CDR, or the best number is to look at IFR, and IFR cannot be calculated, and the other two are not exact, and they are going to be fluctuating. So I hope that is clear. Now, if I continue here, Sweden had said one more thing, and that is that they are keeping the country sort of open. So it was not 100% open because they still had banned the gatherings more than 50. Schools were open only for lesser than 16 years of age, and so on. But one of the point, they never said that we are looking for herd immunity. They never said that we think that this is not something that we should be concerned about. And they also said that their population, the Swedes, are actually educated, and they know how to keep the social distance, and they believe and trust the government, and they're working with them, and they're comfortable with this. So generally, a well-behaved, a better nation that can work with the government or administration to figure out what is the right way to do while they kept the economy going. So the articles that I have collected the data from, I have the information in the description. In Sweden, spending reduced by 25%. In Denmark, spending reduced by 29%. So not a huge difference. And there is a paper I have here which says that social distancing laws cause only small losses of economic activity, during the COVID-19 pandemic in Scandinavia. So it is, as I've been doing, I think this is I do not know if it is a full print or it is a preprint, but it is interesting to look at this article. Travel in Sweden reduced by 40%. However, travel, so of course that means the whatever economic impact of that reduction is there. However, travel in other countries that had a lockdown drastically reduced. I would suspect, I did not see the numbers, 80 to 90%. So that would mean that other countries had a bigger impact, revenue impact, or economic impact because of the reduced travel. Youngsters spending, which normally does not make a very large portion of the economy, usually it is a smaller part. Still, in Sweden, the youngsters spending reduced less compared to other countries. And that makes sense. People were going out, they were doing their business, and so they were spending. Economy shrinkage. So Sweden had 5%, is projected to have 5% shrunk economy for this year. In the other countries nearby, and I believe in Europe as well, the economy shrinking with the lockdown as well was about 5%. So it seemed like the people who were in lockdowns, they had figured out ways to continue to work and continue to earn and continue to spend and continue to do their normal work. But still, economy did shrink for all countries. The Sweden's economy shrinking is comparable to those which are under lockdown. Unemployment in Sweden was 7.1% in March, and it has risen to 9%. I did not find the data for the other countries to actually say that what was the impact of the unemployment. And finally, the public confidence in the administration to handle the pandemic. In April, it was 63% of the people thought that they trust the government, they know, they have confidence in the government that they are handling the pandemic correctly. Now it is 45%. So there is a drop in the confidence. Now, if we go back here, this is where, once again, the important discussion is going to keep occurring, and hopefully this would be settled as more time is spent and as the countries come out of the pandemic. And that is, Sweden is not going to have a second wave, at least with the way they have managed. I don't think they would have a second wave. This is what it is, what they have. And now when the other countries open up, it would now really depend, would they get a second wave or not? If they get a second wave, would they have regimes to manage the second wave correctly or not? And so based on that, we would really know, and not just for the neighboring countries, but for the rest of the world as well. There are countries, for example, I think US is not doing very well. And I think there are some other countries that are doing well as well. So we would find out that later on, but this is the situation in Sweden today. And I hope I had been sharing my screen this time. So I'll look at a couple of questions if here, and then we'll break again. Sorry to do the discussion twice today. So there is a comment from Ziaul Haq. Lockdown is a myth. Nowhere in the world except China actual lockdown was imposed. Well, I would not call it a myth. I just think that people did lockdown in different ways. I have been here in Santa Clara County. We had a lockdown over here. We were not going out. So that was a lockdown. Now there are some countries like China which had very aggressive lockdown. So we didn't have that way that if I went out to get groceries and somebody is dragging me in a van, that didn't happen. So I would not agree with this that lockdown is a myth. I would just agree that lockdowns intensities were different. Even Sweden actually called it to be a lockdown. I don't know what they called it, but that was not a full lockdown. It was still a lockdown where they said not more than 50 people can gather together. Then children or people above 16 years of age would not go to school. And they had similar things for others as well. So that was kind of a lockdown. Excellent. Um, Pasi says, we will see soon in winter, we go in house to then the virus spreads more, then still our cases being detected. So yeah, we're going to see what happens. So Myron, at least the ones that I was showing, the graphs, they were not really, there was not the area under the curve that was more important, but it is that was the daily number of cases that were being shown. To me, it seems like, so one more thing I want to discuss with us here. I think that almost all of the countries, so let me share my screen for one more second. Let's see if I can share it. So if I see here, almost all the countries, they have the situation where, so this is Brazil. I'm going to go down a little bit to see, for example, let's say Pakistan here. Almost all countries have this little peak that appears and then they go down. And to me, it seems like it is not that they have now become, they have a herd immunity or the lockdown has become that much successful. I think it is also people's behavior. When we see people around us affected and impacted, we become careful. And so when we become careful, we try to restrict ourselves and protect ourselves. And so this normal curve that we are seeing, I think one of the factor for that curve is people's care as well. So that is the discussion for today. Yeah, so Arun, very correctly, I was looking at the Sweden's testing rates, and their testing rate have fallen off. But let's talk about that for a second, because that is a similar discussion I saw with Trump and Axiom as well. Testing would tell us how much prevalence of the disease is in the society. But testing more or testing less does not change the number of deaths. Because if a person has gotten into a critical state, they have to end up in a hospital and hopefully they recover, otherwise they'll die. So testing does not impact the death rate. Testing does impact the CFR calculation, and that will be the case fatality rate, the known cases, the percentage of deaths out of the known cases. So the known cases is different when more testing is done or less testing is done. And the idea is very simple. If less testing is done and less known cases or confirmed cases are there, then the case fatality rate would actually look higher. If more testing is done, if known cases are more, then the death rate would actually look lower. But testing has less bearing on the number of deaths. So there is a question, and I have been getting these tweets as well nowadays, that masks do not work and masks are a fake thing and masks are a bad thing. There are so many studies I've discussed. If you look at my videos, there are 2 videos where I've talked about the how do masks work, difference between various mask types, difference between various mask cloth type or the material type, and the effect of receiving the virus versus transmitting the virus. So masks are real. Masks are being used a lot in medical community. Now we are asked to use them as well. I use them as well, and they are real and they are important. I do not agree with anyone saying that masks are useless or masks are hurtful or masks are harmful. These are just, if somebody wants to talk about it, we can have a discussion and we would talk with data, but this is just not right to say masks are not necessary. So, Partha, the discussion of the wave, really a new strain. I have done this discussion as well, that are there more fatal strains of the virus? And I have done this discussion many times that, look, if a virus strain becomes fatal, even more aggressive, even more harmful, then its spread will actually reduce, because the people in which it will go, it will kill them. and they will not be able to transmit it further. Other people will become careful. They will not go near the dead bodies. They will be very careful. So that virus, which is aggressive, which has killed the person, will not be able to get to other people very easily. On the other hand, a virus that has become more adaptable to us, that has become less lethal to us, would have a better chance to spread, because people would have mild symptoms. They will go out in the society, run about, talk about, and give virus to each other. So saying that a virus has become more lethal is actually incorrect. It could become lethal, but then the people would die. The virus, if it is going to continue to spread and even spread more, then it will have to become more and more adapting to us. It has to become less harmful to us to be able to survive in us. So how often should we replace masks? Depends upon the mask's material. For example, N95 mask has a very thorough description or guidelines for how they should be used, when they are contaminated, when they should be replaced, and so on. Then the surgical masks, the basic idea is that if the mask has become contaminated or damaged because of wiping it or cleaning it, or because of usage, then it needs to be replaced. Other than that, if a mask is used, what I have been saying is, let's say you have 5 or 6 surgical masks. It is known that the virus can stay on the mask for 2 to 3 days. So you have 5 masks, you wear one mask today, then when you come back from your work or when the day is over, you put that mask away somewhere, and then next day you use the next mask. Let that mask stay there, let the virus on it become less viable. So next day you wear the next mask and put that at the end of the day. Third day you use the third mask, and now the very first day's mask is now 2 days into becoming clean, and then fourth day you use the fourth mask, and the first mask has become better as well, and the virus has become less viable. So that is how you cycle through the masks. So the question, could we get rid of COVID-19 in 2 weeks if 100% of the population wore N95 masks? Very good question. In theory, yes. In theory, I would not say 2 weeks. What I would say is this: if everyone was back home, if everyone stopped transmitting, then the virus in us would either kill us or will become killed within 2 to 3 weeks. So yes, in theory, that could be done. Yeah, so medical guidelines for masks are very different. You're very welcome, 008 KLM. Yes, definitely. You can hang the mask out in the sun. If you have sun, definitely hang the mask out. That sun would actually help clean it even faster and better. So yeah, so when we say some masks are not good, so I actually heard that in some countries they had made leather mask, and somebody actually called me. I'm telling you, this is a true story. Somebody called me and said, "Sir, I have been using a leather mask. Is that great?" And I said, "Well, leather mask, you cannot breathe through this. Mask has to act like a filter, so that when you breathe through this, the air passes, but the virus and pathogens are trapped. That is a point of the mask, to filter it. And now if you are using a leather mask which has no pores in it, then you are going to breathe in or breathe out from the holes around the mask." So if I have a cloth over here, so let's say my glass cleaning cloth, if this is leather, then I'm going to breathe through the holes around the mask, and then the virus would go out and come in from those holes. So the mask would lose its function. Cool. So I think that is a discussion for today. My apologies that I had not shared my screen before. Hopefully that this lecture, I have deleted the previous video. I would keep this one here. See you guys tomorrow. Please like, subscribe, and share. If you liked what you heard, if you didn't like it, then please don't. And I would see you tomorrow.